My name is Elaine Moreau. I am 31 years old, and the first time my sister Claire took something that belonged to me and watched me notice and did nothing, I was 9 years old and she slid my spelling bee trophy into her backpack like it was a granola bar. That was 22 years ago. By the time I stopped counting, the total came to $143,612, not including the years. I want to be precise about that number, because precision is the thing that saved me. I work as a medical billing compliance auditor for a regional hospital network in central Pennsylvania. What that means in practice is that I spend my days inside a system designed to hide its own errors, diagnosis codes mismatched to procedures, duplicate charges buried in itemized statements, dates of service that don't align with admission records. I catch what doesn't belong. I've been doing it for 9 years. I can look at a claim form the way a jeweler looks at a stone. I see the flaw before I see the setting. That skill had caught 17 fraudulent billing patterns across 4 hospital systems in 6 years. It was about to dismantle my own family's longest-running lie. The morning I'm going to start with is a Tuesday in September 2014. I was 20 years old. I'd been accepted to Columbia University the previous spring, early decision, full financial aid package minus an expected family contribution of $4,200 per semester. My parents had agreed to cover it. My mother had cried when the letter came. I remember the weight of that envelope in my hand, the Columbia crown embossed in the corner. I remember thinking the paper felt expensive. Claire called home 6 weeks before my first semester was supposed to begin. I was packing boxes in my room. My mother answered the phone in the kitchen, and I heard the sound change, the way air leaves a room when someone stops breathing normally. 20 minutes later, my mother came upstairs. She stood in my doorway. She said, "Claire has lymphoma, stage 2, we need the tuition money for her treatment, you'll defer." She didn't ask, she told me, the way you tell someone the power's been shut off. I stood in my bedroom doorway holding a Columbia pennant I'd already thumbtacked to the inside of my suitcase lid. My hands didn't shake, my face didn't move, something inside me went very still, the way a machine goes still when it's recalibrating. I was already running the math. Stage 2 lymphoma, treatment costs, insurance gaps, the timeline, the tuition, the semester deadline. I was already inside the numbers before I felt anything at all. I said, okay. I kept records of all of it, not because I planned to use them, because that's what I do, I track things. Before I take you through what those records show, tell me, what time is it where you are? Because I remember the time of every single incident in this list. The first time Claire took something that should have been mine was the spelling trophy. I was 9, she was 12. She told my parents I'd given it to her because I felt bad that she'd lost. My parents believed her. They praised her for being gracious enough to accept it. That was the structure Claire needed. Claire received. The rest of us organized ourselves around her gravity. The second time was my 14th birthday. My grandmother had sent $200 specifically for me, written on the card, in her handwriting, for Elaine's art supplies. Claire needed new cleats for soccer. My mother redirected the money. Grandma would understand. That brought the running total to $200, and we were only in 2007. The third time was my junior year of high school. I'd been awarded a $500 departmental scholarship for AP Biology. Claire needed a deposit for a spring break trip with friends. My father wrote a check from my savings account, the one my grandmother had started for me. He didn't tell me. I found the withdrawal on a bank statement 3 months later. Total, $700. Still small, still early. Then came Columbia, $4,200, redirected for Claire's cancer treatment. Total, $4,900. Except it wasn't 4,200, because when I deferred, I lost my financial aid package. When I reapplied the following year, the package had changed. The new expected family contribution was $11,000 per semester. My parents said they couldn't cover it. I took loans. Over 4 years, those loans I would not have needed if I'd started on time with my original package, totaled $68,000 in principal. $4,900 became $68,000, and we were only at the beginning. The irony is that I spent every working day finding the moment where one misclassified code cascades into a six-figure discrepancy. I was trained to trace how a small initial error compounds, and I was living inside exactly that cascade, watching it happen in slow motion to my own future, and calling it family. Claire recovered. Or rather, Claire announced her recovery. My parents threw a celebration dinner at the house, the dining room table covered in a cloth my mother only used for Easter, candles lit, Claire at the head. My father raised a glass. Claire smiled with the particular radiance of someone who has been the center of gravity for so long they no longer notice other people orbiting. Nobody mentioned Columbia. Nobody mentioned my deferral. Nobody mentioned the loans. I graduated from a different school, a good school, a state university, 4 years later, with $68,000 in debt, and a degree that took me into medical billing because it was the field that was hiring and I needed to start repaying immediately. I moved to Harrisburg. I worked. I paid. Every month, $642 left my account. Every month for 10 years. That brought the running total to $68,700, the loans plus interest at that point. And we were only in 2018. Then came the wedding. Claire's wedding, 2019. My parents asked me to contribute to the reception costs. Claire's been through so much, my mother said. We want this to be perfect for her. The amount, $12,000. I said I couldn't afford it. My father said, after everything she survived, this is what family does. I put it on a credit card. Interest rate, 22%. That $12,000 became $14,800 by the time I paid it off. Running total, $83,500. Then came the house. 2021. Claire and her husband wanted a down payment assist. My parents contributed $30,000 from the family trust, a trust that was supposed to be split equally among the three children. My share was supposed to be $40,000. I received 10. Claire received 30. My brother Marcus received 40, his full share. Nobody explained the discrepancy. When I asked, my mother said, Claire's medical bills ate into the family finances. This was the fairest way. Running total, $113,500, counting my lost trust portion. Then came the final installment. October 2023. My father called. Claire needed help again. This time, her son's private school tuition. Could I cover one semester? Just one. $6,000. Sick beats smart in this house, Elaine, Claire said on the phone when I hesitated, her voice light, almost laughing. You got the brains, I got the story, it's just how it works. I didn't respond right away. I held the phone against my ear and listened to her breathe on the other end, comfortable, entitled, bored by my silence. Something in me went perfectly still, not anger, something colder. Something that had been doing arithmetic in the background for 22 years and had just received its final variable. Running total, $119,500, and counting. I'm going to take you through this year by year, but first, drop your location in the comments. I want to know how many people are watching someone finally read the numbers out loud. I started with the cancer, not because I suspected, because my profession requires me to verify before I close a file, and Claire's file had never been closed inside my mind. Stage 2 lymphoma. Diagnosed 2014. I began with what I could access. Claire had been treated, supposedly, at Geisinger Medical Center. I knew from 9 years of compliance work exactly what a legitimate oncology billing trail looks like. It starts with a pathology report. It proceeds through a staging workup. It generates specific CPT codes, 88305 for the biopsy, a cascade of imaging codes, specific infusion codes for chemotherapy protocols. Every legitimate cancer diagnosis leaves a billing footprint as distinct as a fingerprint. I requested my parents' insurance explanation of benefits for 2014 through their carrier's online portal. They'd never changed the family login credentials. What I found: 2 office visits billed under a general internal medicine code, 1 blood panel, no pathology code, no imaging beyond a standard chest X-ray, no infusion codes, no oncology referral code, no chemotherapy administration. That was layer 1, the obvious insult. The diagnosis that consumed my future generated the billing footprint of a routine checkup. Layer 2 came from the timestamps. The 2 office visits were coded to the same physician, a Dr. Alan Wexler, internal medicine. I looked him up. He'd lost his license in 2019 for writing fraudulent disability certifications. His practice had been in Scranton. Claire had told my parents she was being treated in Danville, at Geisinger. Dr. Wexler's office was 63 miles from Geisinger. The visits were real. The diagnosis was manufactured. I pulled the claim submission metadata through the insurer's audit trail, something I have access tools for professionally. The claims had been submitted manually, not electronically. Paper claims, hand-coded. The diagnosis code listed was C81-10, Hodgkin lymphoma, nodular sclerosis type. But the procedure codes attached didn't match a lymphoma workup, they matched a general wellness visit. Someone had put the right diagnosis code on the wrong claim, like putting an expensive frame around a blank canvas. The almost correct flaw: the ICD code was current for 2014, but it was listed in a field that Geisinger's electronic billing system auto-populates. You cannot manually enter a code in that field without triggering a system flag. The paper claim bypassed the system entirely, because it was never submitted through Geisinger. It was submitted by Dr. Wexler's office, using a different provider ID. That brought me to layer 3, the older pattern. I went back further, into the family financial records accessible through joint accounts my parents still hadn't restricted. I found, 2011, Claire had missed 2 months of school junior year for what my parents called a cardiac scare. I'd been 13. I barely remembered it, but I found the insurance records: 1 ER visit, 1 echocardiogram, normal findings on both, no cardiac diagnosis, no follow-up. But my parents had pulled $1,500 from the college fund to cover Claire's medical expenses. Which medical expenses? The ones that generated 2 claims totaling $400. And before that, 2008, a kidney issue that required Claire to skip family vacation and stay with my aunt. The insurance record: 1 urgent care visit for a UTI, standard antibiotics. Total cost, $160, but my parents had sent my aunt $800 for Claire's care. Each time Claire was sick, money moved. Each time, less went to everyone else. The pattern was 19 years old. Layer 4. The deeper fraud. The one thing the total didn't account for. I traced the family trust disbursements, the ones that had given Claire $30,000 and me $10. The trust administrator was my father's attorney, Gerald Keene. I called his office and requested my beneficiary statement. When it arrived, the total disbursement to my account read $40,000, full share, disbursed in 2021. I had received 10. I called my bank, confirmed, 1 transfer from the trust, $10,000, March 2021. I called Gerald Keene directly. He confirmed the full $40,000 had been sent to the routing number on file for my account. I asked him to read me the routing number. He did. It was not my bank's routing number. I knew that number. I'd seen it on Claire's mortgage application, a document my mother had asked me to help review for errors before submission. Claire's checking account. $30,000 of my trust had been routed to Claire's account using a beneficiary form with my name on it and her routing number. I requested a copy of the beneficiary form from Gerald Keene. It arrived by mail 4 days later. My name, my signature block. But the middle initial was wrong, M instead of R, and the slant of the signature leaned 12 degrees left. I am right-handed. My signature leans 6 degrees right. Claire is left-handed. Running total, corrected, $143,612. Counting 22 years of fabricated illness, redirected funds, forged documents, and compound interest on loans I never should have carried. My parents held their annual family dinner the first Sunday of December. Every year, same house, same dining room, same tablecloth, the one reserved for occasions my mother deemed significant. The house itself was their pride, a colonial revival in Mechanicsburg they'd refinished over 30 years. Every room reflected my father's taste, my mother's arrangements, their shared idea of what a successful family looks like. This was the room where my father had raised his glass to Claire's recovery. This was where decisions were made and presented as love. I arrived with a leather portfolio, Inside, the insurance EOBs from 2014, 2011, and 2008, Dr. Wexler's disciplinary record, the trust disbursement confirmation, the beneficiary form with the wrong initial and the wrong slant, Claire's mortgage application showing her routing number matching the trust transfer, and the running total, itemized, dated, sourced. I waited until after the main course. Claire was telling a story about her son's school play. My father was laughing. My mother was clearing plates. My brother Marcus sat across from me, watching me the way he'd been watching me for years, aware something was wrong, unwilling to name it. I set the portfolio on the table. I said, "I need to discuss something. It won't take long." Claire looked at the folder. "What is that?" "Documentation." I opened to the first page, the 2014 insurance EOB. I read the codes aloud. I explained what they meant. I showed the absence of oncology billing. I showed Dr. Wexler's name, his disciplinary history, his office location 63 miles from where Claire claimed to be treated. My mother stood up. "Elaine, not here, not tonight." I continued, the trust disbursement, the routing number, the beneficiary form. I placed it on the table, signature visible. Claire said, "I don't know what you think you're proving, but this is insane." My father said, "You've always been jealous of your sister, even when she was sick. This is beneath you." Claire said, "The insurance stuff is probably a clerical error. Hospitals make mistakes all the time." Three tactics: denial, reframing me as the aggressor, dismissal. I placed the beneficiary form next to Claire's mortgage application. The routing numbers matched. I placed both next to my bank statement showing 10,000, not 40. I did not speak. Marcus leaned forward. He looked at the documents for a long time. Then he said, "Claire, that's your routing number. I was there when you opened that account. I drove you to the bank." Marcus, who had received his full 40,000, who had never questioned why mine was different, who had spent a decade knowing something was wrong and choosing his own comfort. Marcus, whose voice had never once intervened on my behalf in 22 years. He was looking at the documents with the expression of someone who has just realized that the structure he benefited from was built on something he cannot defend. My mother said, "Marcus, stay out of this." But Gerald Keene was also present, my father's attorney. My father had invited him to dinner that year, a social invitation, nothing more. Gerald stood in the kitchen doorway, holding a glass of wine. He said, quietly, "David, I sent the full 40,000 to the routing number on the beneficiary form you submitted to my office. If that number belongs to someone other than Elaine, that's a matter I'd need to report to the trust administrator, which is me." Claire's face didn't crumble. It tightened. She looked at my father. My father looked at the table. I said the only thing I had left to say. One sentence. Quiet. Into the silence of that room. "You didn't have cancer. You had an audience." I did not elaborate. I picked up my portfolio. I stood. I looked at my mother, who had not moved, who had not spoken since her first objection, whose hands were folded in her lap the way they'd been folded for 22 years, and I left. The consequences did not arrive all at once. They accumulated, the way everything in this family accumulated. Week 1. Gerald Keene filed a formal report with the county district attorney's office regarding the forged beneficiary form. My father was named as the submitter of record. Claire was identified as the recipient. Week 3. The DA's office opened a fraud investigation. My father retained separate counsel. Claire retained separate counsel. Their attorneys advised them not to communicate with each other or with me. Month 2. My parents' marriage, already strained by a decade of enabling a system that served one child at the expense of the others, entered formal separation proceedings. My mother moved to my aunt's house in Carlisle. She did not call me. Month 3. Claire's husband, who had not known about the trust fraud, the faked diagnosis, or the 22-year pattern, filed for legal separation. He called me once, briefly. He said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know any of it." I said, "I know." Month 4. My father entered a guilty plea on one count of trust fund fraud. Restitution ordered, $30,000 to my account, plus legal fees. His attorney negotiated community service in lieu of incarceration, given his age and lack of prior record. Month 5. Claire was not charged. The statute of limitations on the 2014 insurance fraud had passed. But the social architecture of her life, the narrative of survival, of bravery, of the sister who beat cancer at 23, collapsed publicly when Marcus, in a moment I did not ask for and cannot fully explain, posted a brief statement on social media confirming what had been found. 3 sentences, no editorializing, just dates, amounts, and the word fabricated. Claire's employer, she worked in nonprofit fundraising for a children's health charity, placed her on administrative leave pending internal review. She resigned within the week. Month 6, Marcus called me. He said, "I knew something was wrong for years. I didn't look. I benefited from not looking. I'm sorry." I said, "Thank you for saying that. I did not say it was okay. It wasn't okay. It was real, and it was late, and it left something unresolved between us that neither of us pretended to fix with a single phone call." Month 9, the restitution payment arrived. $30,000. I sat at my kitchen table in Harrisburg and looked at the number on the deposit confirmation. It was not $143,000. It was not 22 years. It was $30,000 arriving 9 months too late to undo anything, but arriving nonetheless, in an account with only my routing number, under only my name. Idle and alone. I did something with that money I'd been postponing for 11 years. I enrolled in a weekend intensive program at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. Not a degree, not a career change, $200 in art supplies, the amount my grandmother had sent me when I was 14. Charcoal, paper, a set of brushes I'd wanted since I was a teenager. I sat in a studio with north-facing windows on a Saturday morning and drew something for the first time since I was 13 years old. No one asked me to justify the expense. No one redirected it. No one needed it more. Marcus and I meet for coffee once a month now. We do not discuss Claire. We discuss what we are building separately and whether our separate buildings can someday share a foundation. The answer isn't clear. It doesn't need to be clear yet. I think about what running totals actually measure. A ledger tells you what left and what arrived. It tells you when and how much. But it doesn't tell you what the losses became inside a body, how a 19-year-old packing for Colombia becomes a 31-year-old who flinches when someone says the word defer. Numbers don't capture the years between the injury and the understanding. They can't hold the weight of a family that called redistribution love, or the particular silence of a mother who watched the math happen and chose to believe it was fair. What I know now is that a running total only becomes useful when you stop adding to it, when you refuse to be the next line item. When you close the ledger, not because the debt has been repaid, but because you've decided that the person holding the pen is no longer authorized to write in your column. If you sat down tonight and added up everything you've given, not in love, not in gratitude, but under the weight of someone else's repeated need that somehow always arrived at your expense, what would the total be? And more importantly, what would change if you stopped counting someone else's withdrawals and started tracking your own deposits? This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, education, and dramatic reflection. We hope it reminded you that your dignity is not negotiable, and that setting a boundary, even a painful one, can be an act of love for yourself and everyone the pattern would have reached next.